Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk all things round 18 with my team. But before we get into that, as always, continue to check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube and Spotify. And if you want to get in contact with us, it is Twitter, Swiz26 for me, or Supercoach Insider 100 for Ben, Chris, and myself. And thank you to our ongoing support of this podcast by Splash Vodka. We really do appreciate all your ongoing support, as we do the community that continues to not just watch our podcast, but get in contact with us to talk Supercoach and all things footy. Talking about all things footy, if you haven't already, check out Fancast AFL. That's myself, the Centre Bounce boys. We've got Luke there from the Pies, Hawks, Talk Damo, and we've got Jake over there from Saints Talk, all getting together to talk footy. The next episode is dropping tonight, which is Tuesday. So if you do like your talking footy / footy classified, just general footy chat, definitely check that out. And if you've got anything that you would like us to discuss on that, hit me up on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to add it to our run sheet. All right. On to Supercoach, and for me, I'm very happy to report 26.49 last week, absolutely flying, and that helped because of Dunkley being out. I did talk about this is why I wanted 23rd and 24th premium on the bench, because I can cover them, and where a lot of people were using your Marriage and Sheldrick, who had a bit of a poorer performance last week, to cover that. Darcy Cameron, a little bit underwhelming, would have rather a little bit more than an 80. However, to have that premium cover with a highly owned premium out really did help me out a lot. So apart from that, everything else went as well as it probably could, maybe outside of Tom Green there in the midfield. Had the captain on Lachie Neale, so probably only cost 1 point for those who went golden. Congratulations to those who did VC him. So yeah, overall, for the week actually, 666. I don't know if that's a good sign or not, but yeah, so 666 for the week, and for overall have moved up 325 more spots to 644. So pretty well where I was the week before, after that sort of little bit of a downfall from the previous week. So yeah, not really happy with that. The one person who's actually hoping that Dunkley will be out for one more week, especially if Cameron was to score well on Friday night. So that's what on Saturday this week against the Freo Dockers. So yeah, no, if he could do that and cover Dunkley, if he was to still miss, they're still unsure about that. But yeah, that does give me the leg up. And now that Sicily is back, which is a fantastic pod for me, I'd really be happy with maybe a backman. I was talking about this to the boys. I don't think it'd be Dacos. Chris keeps saying to me, there's no way Dacos gets rested. He's got Brownlows to potentially think about, but I'd be very happy to have a Stewart or a Zach or a Dawson or somebody like that. I was never going to call him Zach Dawson there. A Jordan Dawson, or somebody who's popular owner, even in the midfield, where I could able to have Day score, especially because Day is playing North Melbourne this week. So I would be hoping for another large score from him. So that's definitely what I'd be hoping for. As at present time, Sicily's only in 347 teams of the top 1%. He's been traded in by looks by 192, so 18% overall. I would be hoping that doesn't jump over 20%, because he would be a very nice pod and playing North Melbourne. Now that he's been rested, hopefully he's going to go quite large. So that's what I'm hoping for there. I've got Mills again there with the emergency. Had a cracking last quarter last week. For the first 3 quarters, did not happen for him at all, and then did go berserk with a 54-point last quarter. So the ability to able to loophole him, and then have the ability with Charlie Constable to move back into the back line and Will Day to come on, if that's how I want to go. And then if Dunkley was to play and Cameron was to score well, that gives me the ability to move it forward into the midfield to cover a Mills score, which was probably, I'm thinking, sub 95. So this is why I like the 23rd and 24th, because if they are all playing, I do have the flexibility. The only issue this week, it's Roberts, so I actually can't use him to move, and that's why I brought in Bennett, which is from Hawthorn last week, because as a non-playing player, he has a later game this week, so I'm hoping at least one of Roberts or Bennett each week has that later game that I can move them around. So 30k in the bank still, one trade left, so we don't want any long-term injuries, but there is a potential trade I am looking at, and we'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, most things are pretty solid. In regards to your VC and C, there are plenty of options this week. A lot of people who had Goulden last week will probably be backing him in. Maybe not as good of a game because it is the Dogs, and we've talked about their midfield, how hard it can be to score against them. Just a lot of mouths to feed. Tim English up against Hickey. Not a bad shout there. Also Bont, and I've been sort of debating Bont with the Thursday night game. Maybe he's can probably get off the chain there, but that Richmond midfield last week probably didn't score that well against the Swans midfield. There was naturally Shea Bolton had an awesome game, but he's that more half forward midfielder compared to your Tarantos and Hoppers and that. So probably staying away from them. From the Melbourne and Brisbane game, it's hard to go against Neil. We did see what Jack Steele did against the D's last week. So he has been one that I've had the VC on all week and still debating him, but I have moved it on to Dacos for now. He's becoming just the most watchable player in the league, and it's really hard not to want to VC him each week. If Sicily had an earlier game against North, I'd probably go him, but yeah, I like him. And then Laird playing against the Giants. The hard thing with Laird, he does have at least it's a Saturday game, not a Sunday game. He has killed a few people on Sundays. So maybe a Laird or a Dawson as the backup, but as reliable as they've probably been, they have had their shockers. The other one that I'm very tempted to captain, and I know he's playing down Geelong, and Geelong team's usually pretty good, but midfielders, we only saw what LDU did last week. Against Geelong, Zachy Merritt is pretty well becoming as safe as houses, and actually I might even do that now, is just go with the Zachy Merritt as the backup captain, because he has been as safe as houses. Watching him play last week, his leadership, his ability to spread from the contest, get involved in scoring change, even gets down there and if needs to take a kick out of defence, very much like what we've talked about with Dawson. So his ability to score from many avenues. I think he probably is the safe one to back in. If you don't have Merritt, it's probably somebody that you should seriously consider. The only problem is his price these days, and at 672 he has the chance to crack the 700k mark. Break even of 81 this week, and it could come as early as next week. So he is having a fantastic season, Zachy Merritt. All right, in regards to potential trades, and not this week for me, but the one I'm looking at, and we'll get into a couple of the questions that have been sent in after that. But there are a couple of options, and the one that I really like, and we've been talking about in a lot of our group chats, is George Hewitt. Now, this guy was going into the season a premium, average 110 last year. We could have not spoken highly enough. I took him early in a couple of drafts, which worked out real well for me. So him and Will Brodie have been definitely the most disappointing players for the season. So Hewitt's sitting at 280k, break even of 125. Now, he's been the sub for the last few weeks, and that's why he scored 22, 19, and 17. The thing now is Matt Kennedy's actually gone down injured. So there is a spot there for George Hewitt to come in. Now, with that break even of 125, I'm really hoping, and it's not going to happen, but I've got fingers crossed that he could be subbed just one more week, so he could get himself down to under 240k. My perfect world would be down to, say, 235k, because marriage is naturally, not that far away. Sitting there right now at 165, playing the Tigers, but playing at home, he has seemed to have gone a little bit better. Did get that 76 against St Kilda. Not expecting him to go that, but even with a 43, what Supercoach have him projected, he would get up to a 196. So I feel like, maybe a home game, could he get a 60, 63, something like that? And then that would actually put him, if George Hewitt was sort of the sub, put him in range to get him up to Hewitt. Now, that is all fingers crossed, all best case scenario. Now, if it doesn't happen, I'll just hold on to the trade. But that is something I am really hoping would come through, because then I could put Bennett's up forward or Roberts up forward and loophole Cameron just as a forward loophole there, and then use Hewitt and Mills as M8, M9, with still the ability to swap around your days and Darcy Cameron's players like that. So that is the world's best perfect scenario for me. Now, if it does, as I said, doesn't come true, oh well. But I do know quite a few highly ranked super coaches, including last year's winner, is definitely looking at bringing Hewitt in as that sort of M9. As we said, 280, even if you can hold one more week, and that would be the perfect scenario. So just somebody to think about, potentially holding one more week, have a look at this guy. And if with Kennedy out, he has a role where it looks like he's scoring 90 plus again, you're getting an absolute bargain basement player for somebody who we know can average 110 throughout a whole season. So, definitely something to think about, because this is where we're at now, where people are looking at your bargain price players. So, we've got to have somebody there that potentially you can trade in, which is not going to break the bank. And then with a lot of people, they only have a couple of trades left, and you don't want to be burning and getting down to 0 trades, because unless you've got the cover. Now, I've been having some people send in teams, and they're still got non-premiums, or to be like an Ashcroft or Sheasel on field, and they're down to 1 trade. And people then going, oh, well, at least I'm fully primo. Well, Sheasel and Ashcroft aren't the worst people to have there at your M8 or D6, but I wouldn't be going off bragging, saying you're full premium with them on the field when, like even myself there, I'm running Sinclair as my D6. Other people are running, other premium like Houston. I think I even saw a midfield, and it might have been it could have been like a Green or a Kelly. I know Kelly didn't go that great last week, but one of them at like M8, there's some ridiculously good sides going around. And this is what you're going to be competing against coming into finals, or even if you're trying to up the ranking. So outside of trying to find some value players, which there are still a few around, or if you're wanting that sort of point of difference. But I'd be, if you are in that situation, well, it's just fingers crossed for you, and hopefully Ashcroft and Sheasel can continue to do what they're sort of doing. As I said, there were a couple other ones to potentially look at, and you're really looking at these guys in particular with high break evens, and that's just because they've got either being used as sub or coming back from injury, and there definitely are a couple there that have really large break evens that we've got to consider. And I'm looking more at the players under 400k, because you don't want to be bringing one of these guys in if you need to use 2 trades to do it. So this is a scenario where if you've got maybe even a Sheldrick, a Devon Robertson, and it's not just yet, but you might be thinking next week, 2 weeks, and this is what all of Supercoach is. It's not just the week to week, but it's a little bit of forward planning on what you want to do with your team. So Jeremy Cameron sitting there at 395 is due back against the Bombers. Don't bring him back this week, but he does have that -3, and his score is also got a 53 before that. His break even is 176. So now that they are playing the Bombers and then the Lions away, so there is potential there for him to drop. The perfect world would be 100k. It might not be as much if he has a couple of good scores, so it might only end up being a 40 or 50k drop to get him down to 350, but at least you've got some scope there to play in. If you've got, as we said, those Robinson, Sheldrick types, you could be potentially looking at Jeremy Cameron for that 4 or 5 week period. Now, they don't have the easiest draw, Geelong. But if they are in that position where they have to keep winning, we know how good of a player he is. He's had his rest. He's back in. You could see him coming home strong those last few games. Another real left field suggestion, and this is very left field, and I know a lot of the Essendon supporters have been very negative of what his future, just what his general future is at the Bombers. But Dylan Shield, for example, has been used as sub for the last couple of games, an 8 and a 22, which now means he's 292 and a break even of 137. Now, unfortunately, with all these younger Bombers coming in, and so also with Parrish and Merritt being fully fit, and touch wood that continues, he sort of has lost his role there. But you'd hope that maybe he could drop another couple of games, and this is another potential one. They've got Geelong Bulldogs next couple of weeks, which could see him drop as low as, say, a 220k. Maybe worst case scenario is that 240. And then they do have that little run where they go Sydney, West Coast, North Melbourne Giants before they play the Pie. So if the Bombers were to cop an injury or two, just one to monitor, because if you're wanting somebody who in the past has scored hundreds, and he has scored a couple hundreds this year and a 94 against the Cats earlier in the season, as a player that you could potentially pick up at 220k if there was an injury at Essendon, might be just that very handy little M9 to come on and go, well, I can loophole him against West Coast or North. It might just be that little pod leg up that I need. So as I said, these aren't perfect perfect players that you want on field, but a Jeremy Cameron you could potentially play as an F6. A Dylan Shield, if everything went right injury wise, just something to think about. You've even got, and this one's a real interesting one. Horn Francis has now dropped to 340, which is just under his starting price. And I know, very popular pick at the start of the season. He was in about 36% of teams at one point there. And it's massively dropped. Now he's owned by 18% of the overall competition. Down to 340, but again has a quite large break even. Well, 112, which is manageable, but Carlton and Collingwood up next 2 weeks, and then the Crows and the Cats. So it's a tough little draw. Has only been scoring 30s, 40s. Apparently, a lot of the Port players were a bit sore, talking about some rests coming up in the next week or two. If it's going to happen, it's most likely to be an away game. So would not surprise me against Carlton or Geelong, gets a little rest. Just somebody to monitor, because if he was to have another poor game, and there, it could be sub 300, might be able to have a forward mid that you could pick up sub there if you are trying to swap one of those players around. So these are just because of the situation now, and I know a lot of people, everybody is wanting still those premium guys. And I know somebody messaged me in this week and said, I'm thinking about getting rid of Zeeble and Sheasel to bring in Stewart and then a cheap rookie. Now, the problem with that is, yes, we want the points on field, and Stewart, that 124 looks good. But potentially there you are, well, not only potentially, you're getting on-field points, but what you're losing by doing that. So, if Zeeble was not to play this week, it makes more sense on doing that, because she's always losing cash, and there's and it's useless having somebody who's not even playing. However, if Zeeble finds his way back into the team this week, as he did as sub last week, and now he's back playing in the back line and he's picked, you've got the ability to then have not only Zeeble maybe up forward and Sheasel at back, which gives you the loophole both sides, or you've got Sheasel and Zeeble there, and you might able to find a loophole option. So, for example, you might have, I'm trying to think, somebody on an earlier game, you might even have Melican, Bailey Dell, one of those players. I know that 15 million team that Abs put up, about like saying Trent Rivers, for example. So there's a few like semi-premium guys that are running around teams that you might be loopholing. Even it might be a sort of a Sard from Carlton. So if you've got sort of players like that in your back line, you potentially could put them on the bench, put the emergency on them, and then keep your Zeeble or your Sheasel and loophole, and just to see how they go. And then if they weren't to perform, then maybe it's if your player was to perform that you're loopholing, let's just say it's Melican. You've got the rookie in Melican, he plays the Doggies, he goes 80. Then you might go, okay, that's solid enough. I'm going to do Sheasel and Zeeble out. Bring in Stewart, so I've got that premium on the field, and then I can put that rookie on and take Melican's score. Now, that's only a 1 week situation, and I'd try to think a little bit more long term. However, if you've still got trades up your sleeve, and I think this person in particular did, you can have a look at that, and at least you've banked 80 points this week instead of like rolling the dice with a Sheasel and a Zeeble. Another question I've had is about like Sheasel, what would be the best option to go with him, any position? So Mills has been a popular person to trade in still, so I really was backing him in. It didn't look good for the first half last week, but naturally worked itself out, which was good. And again, I'm sort of using Mills as that M8, M9 loophole guy. So in a particular perfect world, you don't want Mills just as your straight M8. Because there's going to be a different, scoring patterns. Playing the Dogs this week could potentially struggle, but then he's got the ability to come out and score 120, especially if they put him back behind the ball. We know what he can do there. So if going Sheasel to Mills meant you've got to play Mills on field, it might not be the best thing to do. But at the same time, Sheasel, this is the problem. And I can understand why everyone's looking at trading him, because it is, he's come out and scored 79 and 65, but they have played Adelaide and Geelong last 2 weeks. Now, yes, he does have a break-in of 119, which would most likely see him drop cash. but they do play Hawthorn, St Kilda and West Coast in their next 3. There is potential there for Sheasel, who has scored, what's he got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tons throughout the season. So there's potential for him to score at least 1 or 2 more hundreds in that. And maybe it's not the time to move him. However, if you are really dead set on going, okay, no, this guy has to go out at 4.59, and let's just say you have no cash, which might be a very potential thing. Now, most people have some sort of cash in the bank, but if you were one of those people who, for whatever reason, had absolutely no cash in it, and you're trying to trade somebody who is worth 4.59, and you're looking at your people, now there isn't a huge amount available. Now, we already talked about some really basement cheap options before. However, Sard at 4.47, here's a guy who we've seen in the past. He has averaged over 100 in the season. There was a period there where it wasn't overwhelming. He's got 84, 85, 81, 85, 83. Did have the 100 on the weekend against Freo. So at 4.47, not too bad. But here's the thing: him versus Sheasel, is there any more big difference between him scoring? So would I be pulling the trigger for a trade for somebody who may or may not score? Yeah, I don't know if that's worth it. Outside of that, you could potentially look at maybe a Dustin Martin type, who definitely showed he was back in form the other day with the 131 against the Giants. Dion Prestia is another one from the Tigers that at least we know he's a pure midfielder. He has the ability to score 100, but again, his body does let him down. So these are the sort of decisions you've got to then make going, this is what's in my range. Like Bailey Smith was one that we were big on, and he's dropped completely out of form. He's in this sort of price range too. So, yeah, you've got guys who have the ability to score over 100 and can go in patches and runs where they'll definitely average, 100 to 110, no problems. But there is also potential for these guys to actually score less than Sheasel. There's no guarantee. So is it really worth burning that trade? And that's what you've got to ask yourself. How much valuable is that trade? Because let's just say you get in a position where, touch wood, one of these premiums, like a Bontaniel, Laird, whoever, goes down with injury. Then what happens to your team? So this is what you've got to think of. And now the only one that I'd really would say, if you must and you have to trade that, it's got to be Harry Himmelberg. So at 411k, he's going on the 84 or 90 the last 2 weeks, but he has looked really good. He is absolutely butchering that ball in defence. So there is going to be a period coming up very soon where, like on the weekend, he gave away 4 free kicks. He's clangers. I think he might have had 6 turnovers, something like that on the weekend. He's going to string all this together, and I can see him getting a 120 or 130 coming up very soon. If he has a game where he's not giving away free kicks and not having just easy clangers that he's having. So we know his ability. He's behind the ball. He takes intercept marks. He takes kick-ins. He does it all back there. So he's had, it does take a little bit of time, I guess, to get back into the action. We saw with Sam Taylor was the one last week that really went big. If you're really big on Sheasel has to go, he would be the only one I'm really confident going, lock him in there at that price. However, if you're in that position where you have more money, probably maybe even hit me up, but there are some good options there. We've talked about Wanganeen-Malera. Looks really settled in that St Kilda back line. He's had a couple poor games, which is natural. He's still a very young player finding his way, but his ability to find the ball, the 59, 68 against Richmond and West Coast. But before that, 113, 100, 119, 116, 110. And it's very much that role. He does love kicking the ball. Takes kick-ins. St Kilda, just the game plan. I know some of the Saints supporters have been a little critical on how their game plan is, but they do like to chip the ball into his hands. The big things like the last, like against the Saints, he had 9 marks, Giants 10 marks, North 11 marks, and that's a little bit because they chip the ball around, find Malera, let him try to get the ball up the field, or he tries to find Brad Hill to break the lines there. So definitely somebody at 477. You're not going to get perfect scores every week. It's a bit shame about Redmond. But the other big one that you've got to consider is maybe Jack Steele. And we've been waiting for this to come. He went up 30k on the weekend. Quite still highly owned because a lot of people do like him. Well, it's only 8%, but compared to some of these other players we're talking about who are barely owned at all. They do have Giants, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, Carlton, Richmond coming up as their next 5. It's just come off a 140. Now, can he keep that up? Well, who knows, but the Saints really do need him to step up week in, week out. The 12 tackles on the weekend, and he's always had that ability to do that. We know how his defensive pressure is fantastic, but he was hitting targets. So he looks so good in that midfield again. So at 474, if you can find a way maybe to get Sheasel up to Jack Steele and move a player into your defence, definitely something to consider there. So there are a couple of options. If you've got other ones where you've got a certain amount of cash, feel free, hit me up on Twitter and we can talk about what you may or may not do with your team. And just coming in hot off the press is Dunkley is confirmed out again. So for me, Cameron is there. Marriage post the last game, so I can technically... but I'll be looking potentially here with moving Bennett and say Dunkley maybe around, but then the hard thing is because Dunks plays on the Friday night. So actually this is what I'm going to actually do as we're live talking here as news comes through. So Dunkley confirmed out, swaps with Bennett. So now I've got the ability here with Darcy Cameron to have a look at how he goes on the Saturday against Freo. And now if he was to have some absolute shocking game, which I don't think will happen, but let's just say he gets subbed out for whatever reason for 20 touchwood, it doesn't happen, I can still bring on Marriage. And it might only be 30, 40 points that they gains, but it's still that 30, 40 points could be a difference. So I do have the ability to loophole him. And now with Mills playing on the Thursday night, I get to have a look at Mills. If Mills doesn't score well, I can swap around a Constable for a Will Day. Will Day comes on the field for Dunkley because Dunkley's playing on the Friday night. If Mills does score well, that's fine. I just take Mills' score and it's as simple as that. So yeah, these are just little things to think about because we know the difference of 20, 30, 40 points, not only just for head-to-head for overall rankings, but can be very much difference in your league matchups. And even scoring what I scored last week, I still lost a league matchup by 50 points. Somebody who scored nearly 2,700. So yeah, the little bit of difference of what you may be able to loophole off. And for me last week, if there was a way I could have, if Sicily had played, for example, and I could have loopholed, say, Tom Green in that example, that could have been all the difference to winning and losing. So definitely think about that. So that's where we're at the moment. Thank you for the ongoing support. Hit us out about your Supercoach teams. Hit us up about general footy. Check out the new podcast, Fancast AFL. Check out the boys, Supercoach Insider. We'll be doing our team, not just the other boys' team pods, but we'll be getting together to talk all things Supercoach for round 18 as well. And we will talk soon. Bye.